You know, I guess I do. I certainly don't set out with a social agenda, but I think that, you know, I think that we all write books for lots of different reasons, and my books are a lot about entertainment. I like to entertain people, and I try to teach them about whatever subject I'm dealing with as well. But I think no matter what book you're writing, it needs to be honest, and it needs to be honest from your heart. And I don't need to be too touchy-feely about it, but I think I'm a huge reader, as many writers are, and I think that I can tell when I start getting a tone from an author that sounds to me that they're not actually invested in what they're writing, that they're not actually believing what it is that they're writing. And there are writers that get themselves to that position. They're either writing to the market, or they're writing their 16th book and they're bored, or whatever it is, that it starts to ring false to me. And I would never want somebody to read my books. And I mean, you can read my books and not like them, or you could decline to read my books. That would be fine, but I would never want someone to read my book and feel that I was pandering to anyone or speaking down to anyone. So I have decided opinions in my life. And so I think that my characters reflect that. They reflect certain opinions. And in general, I'm not saying that, I'm not asking people to vote for Obama, for example, but I do have an agenda in the sense of, I guess some of the basic values that one of the reasons that I love the Bay Area so much is that we tend to be a fairly inclusive community. I have a very hard time with outsiders being treated as if they're wrong for being different. So, this is obviously not a unique theme to Julie. I think a lot of writers talk about feeling like an outsider, or being treated like an outsider, being scorned, being shunned, all of that, and trying to find the strength within yourself and trying to figure out who you are in order to be strong enough to put yourself out there and to rise above. So I think that does come up a lot in my books. It honestly was not something that I thought about doing, and yet enough people have come to me with those interpretations that I think that I must be doing it. But it would make sense because it is something that I believe very strongly in.
Kind of like my books keep having bondage elements. I can't figure it out. Seth, did you have something to add?
Yeah. But if you want to talk about bondage, I don't want to get in the way of that train. Go for it. I think the really important thing that Julie just said is talking about the honesty that a writer has to have. I mean, if we go and set our agenda to write a certain book with a political message, and that's kind of driving the book, you're going to have real problems with it. But, if you have any level of beliefs, which we all do, no matter what they are, these things will come into the book if you just have faith in your process and you're honest with your characters and you're honest about the situations that you're putting them in. My book, Young Junius, which is essentially a crime novel about this kid and his housing projects, in some ways it's also about failed civic promise and civic ideas about housing structures and, what was happening in the late 80s with crack cocaine. And Publishers Weekly, reviewed it as they do. And they said something about, these issues coming through in it. And I was talking to my agent, and she said, well, basically just they get it. I mean, it's like, if you read the book and just say it's about this kid with guns shooting people and trying to get up to the top of these towers, you sort of missed a critical element of it. But for me as a writer, when I'm writing it, it's really important for me to be thinking about those scenes and the visual images of the kid going up these housing project stairs. But of course, all of that stuff is there sort of in my personality and in my head, so it comes through on the page, and, I think in some ways that's inevitable.
I mean, I do try, my third book, The Gatekeeper, is all about immigration and border issues, and a plot by a hate group to sort of create a big, to basically back a new senator who is very anti-immigration and even more extreme than most of the hardliners in Arizona right now, if that's possible. But what I really did try to do with that book is I also tried to put in different characters because it's a complicated issue, and so I tried to put in a range of characters who had very different opinions about it. There was one character who was a second-generation Mexican-American who actually had mixed feelings about, the immigration policy and whether or not it was strict enough. And I think that's something to bear in mind. I mean, I feel like my books are, you know, geared, if you're going to tackle a social topic, you need to, I don't want to stand on a soapbox. I want to try and present a lot of different sides of it. That being said, with the new series, I've been learning a lot about the foster care system and how it fails kids today, particularly when they age out of it. There's actually many more resources available for adults than there are for 18-year-old kids who've just been told that it's time for them to go out and make their own way. And it's been interesting to, you know, consider how a lot of the people who do end up homeless or as drug addicts are people who ended up starting in the foster care system and never got the resources to help them build a real life. So I think I've been a little bit less circumspect with that one than I was with the other series.
I think that's, I mean, to me that's one of the beautiful things about fiction is that you can talk about some of these subjects like foster care, immigration issues, housing project, I mean, difficult, complex issues, and you can present any number of characters who feel different ways about it, and obviously we like to have our evil characters, but we can also have people who don't agree with us who are actually reasonable people, and it's a wonderful way, I think. And again, I'm speaking both as a reader and a writer. I love learning about different issues through fiction because I think it's easier than, you know, reading a textbook, and sometimes
it almost sounds like you're advocating for civil dialogue.
Well, you know, perhaps. Who knows? But I think Barbara Kingsolver once said that she thought that people who read were much more empathetic people because they were exposed to so many different points of view through different characters. And I often think about that when I'm writing because I think that I have to become more empathetic when I'm writing a character, and particularly a character that doesn't actually agree with me, who's spouting a different line than something I believe in. And you need to, as a writer, put yourself in that person's head, at least temporarily, to make them reasonable, because even, you know, even the vilest person is probably a three-dimensional person, except for one or two I can think of, but I won't mention them.
But it's like what they say, where the villain's the hero of their own story, right? And when you're constructing a villain, that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Is the most interesting villains are the villains who are doing it for reasons that make complete and total sense to them. And they have their whole worldview.
That's true.
And I think one of the reasons that crime fiction continues to be so popular and satisfying is that it is blacks and whites. I mean, you see people at their very best, you see people at their very worst, and you get a level of resolution that you don't necessarily get in real life. I mean, we all get kind of caught up in the thrall of cases like the death of Lacey Peterson, or the Kaylee Anthony case. And the truth is that 99% of the time, you never really find out what happened in those cases. It becomes a lot of guesswork, a lot of, you know, water cooler talk, but you don't actually get the resolution. And there's something very satisfying about reading a book that provides that, which most crime fiction does.
Why don't we at this point see if you have questions for us?